Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the Senior Minister at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, a historically humanist congregation, and this is a humanist perspective on theological questions I call Coffee and Wisdom. We have been working with ideas of theology from a humanist perspective. This week, I want to ask a very basic question that is very important within theological thinking, and that is, where is the human in religion? Traditionally, this is called the anthropos. This is a Greek word that just meant human being. So the anthropocentric ideas, and of course, one of the ideas of humanism that we're often attacked for or misunderstood about is, do humanists only center the human as opposed to some sort of deity? Gotta remember this anytime we're talking about theologies. A good Peanuts a cartoon. I hear you're writing a book on theology, says Charlie Brown. I hope you have a good title. Snoopy says, I have the perfect title. Has it ever occurred to you that you might be wrong? And there is the humility in theology that is often missing. I'm going to try to stick with the humbleness if I can. Xenophanes may have been the very first monotheist in Greek history. Xenophanes is a pre-Socratic philosopher who lived somewhere between 570 and 478 BCE. Definitely, he said, all of these stories about the gods in Homer, Hesiod, that just can't be true. God would not be just was kind of silly like that. So probably he began to think about some kind of a larger God concept. It appears so anyway. He has this to say, but if cattle and horses and lions had hands, or could paint with their hands and create works such as people do, horses like horses and cattle like cattle, also would depict the gods' shapes and make their bodies of such a sort as the form they themselves had. Horses would paint horse gods, cattle would paint cattle gods, in other words. And most famously, and he's usually condensed down to saying this, men gods in their own image. Now, Xenophanes was saying this as a criticism of pulling the idea of a deity down to too small by adding human attributes. That's the idea of Xenophanes. A little cartoon I have to share with you here from Dan Pereiro. We have God here at his desk. Don't hold dinner. I still have to pick winners for the Grammys and this week's football games, then tell people to run for political office. Yep, it would be a busy God if God were involved in all the little human traits that we often hear God talked about deciding. Now, another pre-Socratic philosopher, Protagoras, who lived probably 490 to 420 BCE, said this: man is the measure of all things. Now, you've probably heard that, but it's really kind of out of context, to be very frank about it. Protagoras was agnostic concerning the gods. We don't know of any real, totally true Greek atheists. They were agnostic for the most part, saying, I don't think that those silly stories really reflect something that would be godlike. But Protagoras definitely was an agnostic. Man is the measure of all things. But what did Protagoras mean by that? Was he being a humanist, as the kind of cliched humanist that often gets bandied about? Socrates accused him of espousing subjectivity and relativism. Subjectivity and relativism. And you have heard those terms thrown quite a bit in the culture wars here in the United States. Now, let's look at a fairly serious philosopher here, Bertrand Russell, French, who said this: "For once man is declared the measure of all things, there is no longer a true or a good or a just, but only opinions of equal validity whose clash can be settled only by political or military force. And each force in turn enthrones in its hour of triumph a true, a good, and a just, which will endure just as long as itself. This is a classic way of saying if man is the measure of all things, if there isn't a God to guarantee capital T truth, then only power makes any real difference. And of course, Bertrand was saying there must be some sort of God out there to be the foundation of meaning. And indeed, one of the central ideas in theology to keep in mind when you talk with different kinds of people who believe different kinds of things is something called foundationalism. Foundationalism is a view about the structure of justification or knowledge. The foundationalist thesis is short, is that all knowledge or justified belief rests ultimately on the foundation of non-inferential knowledge or justified belief. And that's a definition from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, very in. So you get the idea here that foundationalism says there's got to be something out there that guarantees capital T truth. Well, and of course, we know on the bumper sticker America side of thing, God said it, I believe it, that settles it. That is a foundationalist argument statement. The foundationalists always ask, what do you do when the foundation is cracked? So one of the ways that foundationalists dismiss people who don't believe in a capital G God and a capital T truth is they say, well, what could possibly be your foundation for meaning? Well, the foundationalists always say, you know what? You don't have one, and we've got to patch up the one we've got. That's the only answer. We've got to reclaim traditional religion, traditional ideas of God, or we're just free-floating out here, and all truth is going to be relative, and then we're going to be in a really big mess. Well, you know, that idea of foundationalism is what is nowadays called agnotology. Agnotology is culturally induced ignorance or doubt, often in published form. Agnotology, culturally cultivated ignorance. Agnotology is the study of culturally induced ignorance or doubt. The word is based on neoclassical Greek agnosis, not knowing, and logia, subject matter. Yes, agnostic and agnotology have the same Greek root, not knowing. But agnotology is the study of culturally cultivated ignorance. What possibly could we mean by that? Well, here's a nice example is that, you know, back in the good old days, cigarette companies would say, women, pregnant women, cigarettes are good for you. Taste isn't the only reason I smoke, says this pregnant woman with a cigarette in her hand. People are always telling me that smoking causes low birth weight. Talk about a win-win-win, an easy labor, a slim body, and the full flavor of Winston's. What's not to like about that? Ignorance. And of course, this is being sown by the cigarette companies, so pregnant women will indeed keep smoking. That is purposefully pulling out ignorance and passing it around. We'll be back on Thursday to talk a little bit more about foundationalism, agnotology, and theology in a humanist context. A big thank you for financial support from Anita Martinez, Marcy Lessler, and Ren Nippling. I'm David Breeden, Senior Minister at First Unitarian Society. If you have any questions or comments, definitely email me, minister@firstunitarian.org, and I will see you again on Thursday.